here.
Oh, this one here. Okay.
Right, so you can hear.
Good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining the NCPP's Crime Prevention webinar series once again. The series is on keeping our communities and families safe. Today is the third of 8 sessions, and we will continue every Tuesday and Wednesday until the 7th of July. I ask you to visit our social media platform, NCPP for further details and to register for the other sessions. I am Major Cheryl Richardson, retired, the National Coordinator for the National Crime Prevention Program. The NCPP is a community-centered initiative with a whole of government and whole of society approach to crime prevention. Our purpose is to engage, educate, and empower citizens to achieve safer, stronger, and more resilient communities. We envisage that empowerment will be a key factor in creating a national culture of crime prevention. At the last session, we spoke on the topic of emotional and mental well-being. In case you missed it, this session is still available on our YouTube channel at NCPP. Today, we would focus on the topic domestic and intimate partner violence. This subject is a global health and human rights concern. During this time of COVID-19 pandemic, statistics has revealed that both locally and internationally, there has been a spike in incidents of domestic and intimate partner violence. We are all aware that this type of violence may end in tragedy, and it has the potential to disrupt family life. So with us today to spearhead the discussion on this very important and most relevant topic are Superintendent Claire Guy Allen and Ms. Sabrina Maulash Bash. Superintendent Guy Allen is in charge of the recently launched Gender-Based Violence Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. She's the holder of a Bachelor's of Law degree with honors. Having served for 25 years, she's very passionate about being a police officer, a job she performs with diligence and dedication. The other speaker, Ms. Sabrina Maula Bash, is the General Manager of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Ms. Maula Bash holds a master's degree in Gender and Development Studies. In 2017, she was the recipient of the prestigious Women's Peacemakers Visiting Scholars Award at the Joan B. Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. She also served as a civil society advisory member to the UN Women Caribbean. At present, she sits on the Interministerial Committee set up by the government of Trinidad and Tobago to coordinate strategies to address gender-based violence. Ms. Maula Bash is also a member of the National Reference Group for the Spotlight Initiative. She continues to work as a social, political, and community activist with a keen focus on women's development. Today, these two ladies will both discuss domestic and intimate partner violence. We encourage you, our viewers, to post your questions and comments during the session. And at the end, time permitting, we would seek to answer most of them. Empowerment is key to violence prevention. You can be a part of the solution. We cannot do it alone, but we can do it together. I now turn you over to our host.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to provide some sensitization on this very topical but critical issue for us in Trinidad and Tobago. Can I ask the producer to pull up the presentation? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I wanted to take the opportunity during my presentation, which will go over the course of the next 2 days. The first part of my presentation will provide some kind of background about understanding this thing called domestic violence, family violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, because when we are ready to provide responses, when we are ready to respond and help to come up with solutions, we can only do this if we have a proper understanding of what we are dealing with. And for many of us, we pose all kinds of questions, we ask all kinds of unwanted queries and so on regarding domestic violence, simply because we do not have a general understanding of what domestic violence is, how it impacts not only the victims, the perpetrators, the children and the families, the family members, the extended members, but also how it impacts the communities and, of course, those persons who are being asked to deal with it. So my presentation will help us to understand, first of all, what is domestic violence, the kinds of abuse, how it manifests itself, and so on. And then I will go down into talking about patriarchal systems, show you the cycle of abuse, the wheel of power and control, and hopefully at the end of it, we would be in a position, and you would be in a position, to better understand the issue of domestic violence. I'm not sure what's happening, but producer, can you tell me if the presentation is up? Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for that misunderstanding. So I can go ahead with my presentation, and basically it's entitled Understanding Domestic Violence, and of course I'm presenting on behalf of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So a definition of domestic violence, and Please do not hold me to this definition simply because the Domestic Violence Act is being debated in the Parliament right now, and there may be some adjustments to this definition that I'm going to present to you. But as it stands now, according to the Act, it's any physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, or financial abuse committed by a person against a spouse, child, or any person who is a member of the household or dependent. And of course, this is taken from the Domestic Violence Act. It's also about the abuse of power and control in an intimate relationship. And I will explain that a little bit further down into the presentation. So there are different types of abuse associated with domestic violence. And I'm using domestic violence and of course interchangeably to mean family violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence. So it involves something that we are more familiar with, the physical abuse, which involves things like hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, biting, and so on. It also includes, which a lot of people do not know, denying a partner medical care or forcing a partner to drink alcohol or drug use. That's another element of physical abuse that many people do not know about. We do know about sexual abuse as well, and it's any sexual contact or behavior without consent. It includes marital rape, attacks on sexual parts of the body, forcing sex after physical violence has occurred, or treated one in a sexually demeaning manner. Now there's also the issue of the forced viewing of pornography, which is also another component of sexual abuse. There is also the emotional abuse and its undermining of an individual's self-worth and or self-esteem. It includes constant criticism, diminution of one's abilities, name-calling, or damaging one's relationship with a person's children. Of course, there is economic abuse, and this involves making an individual financially dependent by maintaining total control over financial resources, withholding one's access to money, or forbidding one's attendance at school or access to employment. And finally, we have the psychological abuse, and this includes causing fear by intimidation, threatening physical harm to oneself, to one's partner, children, to a partner's family or friends, destruction of pets and property, and forcing isolation from family, friends, school, or work. So there are different forms of domestic violence, and one aspect of it includes child abuse. And this is any act that endangers or impairs a child's physical or emotional health and development. This includes sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, psychological abuse, lack of supervision, and the failure to provide for a child's physical needs. And of course, another component is elder abuse. And I must say that more and more we are having instances of reporting of elder abuse. And this refers to exploitation or intentional mistreatment of an elder person, especially financial exploitation and physical abuse. And this results from older persons being less independent and needing care from others. Simple things like denying an elder person access to having hygiene or even social interaction. Those are other aspects of elder abuse. So now we come to the why. Why does this thing happen? I want to say, first of all, that intimate partner relationships, domestic violence, and so on, we often think about love, and it happens in relationships of love. But essentially, it's not about love. It's a systematic pattern of behavior solely for the purpose of power and control. And it comes about as a result of a patriarchal system in which our males are privileged, and they're privileged than females, and they're offered more types of authority. They are valued more in the society. So in our societies, for example, the boy child is valued more than the girl child. The boy child is given certain kinds of responsibility. The boy child, you know, it's divided around norms and values in the society. and the roles and responsibility are divided depending on our perception of what we consider to be roles for men and boys and roles for women and girls. And really and truly, this is the prevailing social system in today's world, which is passed on through our belief systems, according to our culture, social norms, and our values. So it is an intricate part of who and what we are, and what we value and what we practice. And because we value males more in our society, and male privilege forms part of our society, it results in something called an unequal relationship or unequal power relations, in which the male is viewed as the authority and which the female is viewed as subordinate. And with that comes the power and control ascribed to the males in our society, in which women essentially are viewed as property, in which women are seen as belonging and to the male, and the male having total power and control and authority over the female. Now, this is very important for us to understand, and there is something called the power and control wheel. And I'm going to paint to explain this, because we always hear the questions, why doesn't the woman leave? Why doesn't the victim leave? And I always take the time to explain that, because it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not as simple as the woman picking up herself and leaving the relationship. And the power and control wheel helps us to understand that, because if we look at the power and control wheel, we will see it's like an all-round attack on that victim. So it's done through several means: using coercion and threats, using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, denying and blaming, victim blaming and victim shaming, using the children, using male privilege, using economic abuse. So when you put all of that combined together, and the victim is in a place, he or she is socially isolated, cut off from social systems. After a while, through extensive emotional and psychological being, the victim is put in a position where she feels that she cannot do anything right. She's cut off from working, she's cut off from education. The perpetrator now has total control over that person. And then, of course, using the fear of the children in the relationship. So essentially, the victim may look on the outside that as if that person is strong, but essentially that victim is not in a position to even make a footstep at the end of the day. So I would like us to understand this critical element of domestic violence. I want to point us as well to some red flags, because sometimes, especially when we are courting and we are in relationships, behavior come out. You see certain things, but you mistake it for love, and we think sometimes the perpetrator is displaying this because it's an element of love. So I ask us to be very wary of certain things. Look out for the red flags. If someone and your partner constantly want to know where you are, constantly messaging, constantly monitoring social media, etc., look out for that, because if that's overdone, you have to be very, very careful of that. Some people feel it's nice. The perpetrator wants to know where I am. He loves me, he adores me, so he's taking care of me. He wants to know that I'm safe. But there is a difference between showing that you care and, of course, stalking you, being on your case all the time, asking you to change your clothes and dress more appropriately, and polices what you wear and tells you what to wear. That's another red flag to look out for. Belittles you in public, especially among your friends and your family, and even on social media. That's something to look out for. Does not want anyone to compliment you, to look at you, to touch you. Does not want you to access education and saying, listen, I do not want my girlfriend or my wife working. I can take care of you. I will treat you like a princess. You would not have to work for anything in your life. You just have to look good, and then I will just take good care of you. You have a man, that wants to take care of you and that will take care of you. look out for that, because that's a way to make sure that you're not in a position to move on. You're not in a position to have your independence. Wants to spend every moment with you and does not want you to hang out with your friends and your family. That's one way of making sure that you're socially isolated and you do not have access to your social systems. That's very important, you know. Questioning you about the kinds of conversation you've had with your friends, with your colleagues, wanting to know every detail. Tells you that they need you in order to live, that they cannot live without you, that they will die if you leave them, that if you do not spend enough time with them, you know, they cannot live. And always want to be in a position to know what's best for you and make decisions for you. When we are in the courting days, we love that. We tend to, you know, because, you know, we feel that there's somebody who will make decisions for us. But be very wary of those kinds of situations. When that person wants to rush into a relationship or wants you to move in with them quickly, that's a no-no, simply because they want to make sure that they have you in a space where they can exercise that total power and control over you, and where they can keep you away from your support systems. Blames you for everything. So if something went wrong, if they shout at you, they say, you made me shout at you. You are the one who caused this. You made me hit you. Of course, does not want you to seek advice from anyone, and does not want you to do things like have your own bank account, things like that. Look out for those things. Insist on dropping you off and picking you up. Sometimes they will go so far as to purchase a car for you and say, listen, because we are living in these times, I want to make sure to drop you off and to pick you up because I want you to be safe. Sometimes it's not about that. It's what they want to know, that they've dropped you, where they've dropped you, that you were there. Sometimes if you're at work, they will call you not on your cell phone, but on your landline to make sure that you are at your workplace. So, you know, it's things like these you need to look out for, so that, you know, you're in a position to determine whether this abuse is taking place. I want to explain something called a cycle of abuse. So this cycle of abuse happens in 4 stages. So the first stage is what we would refer to as the tensions building phase. It's when, you know, possibly the perpetrator comes home from work, something happens on work, and the person comes home and then starts to, you know, quarrel, you know, get edgy, get antsy, as we say, and this can go on for maybe a day. It can go on for a couple of days, or it may even happen over a period of hours, or even a period of minutes, depending on who the perpetrator is. So this would go on, and then the second phase will be the incident, which is, you know, it comes out and then it comes out in all kinds of ways: verbal, emotional, physical abuse, the hitting, the screaming, the arguing, the threats, the intimidation, in which the actual incident really happens. And I want to take this opportunity to explain there is a difference between the root causes of abuse and the triggers. Many people say and have the perception that it happens because the person is drunk. It happened because the person is under, may have taken drugs. Those are essentially the triggers, but it's not the cause, the essential cause of the abuse. The abuse comes from what is known as the root cause, because the person or the perpetrator thinks that I have power and control, and I am as a man or a woman, and I am supposed to dominate you. The triggers are the ways in which the triggers are what happens to provoke that ideology and that thinking that the perpetrator has. So I think that is important for us to understand. So here comes the incident. So the incident happened, black blue eyes, marks on your skin, whatever, and so on. And then when that happens, you know, there is kind of quiet. The perpetrator goes into the calm stage. So the pent-up anger and so on is released. And so there is a period of calm. And the reconciliation phase the perpetrator apologizes, say, well, oh God, it was the rum, you know, it was because I had a hard time at work, it because me and this person fall out, and you know, and my mother or somebody in my family just tripped me, and you know, and don't worry, you know, it is not as bad, you know, and make all kinds of excuses um, for the incident. This is known as the reconciliation. And then the fourth part is the part where the victim loves the most. It's known as the period of calm or the honeymoon phase. And the honeymoon phase is the time when the perpetrator may go and bring all kinds of gifts. You may get a TV that you wanted. You're getting all the chocolates and the roses, and it's a period when the perpetrator apologizes and behaves in a way, because, you know, we often hear, you know, that, you know, they are so good when they are not drunk. When they, you know, when they are not drunk, they're the best person in the whole world. I think in the last situation where the person was murdered, the victim was murdered in the Barrackpore area, we heard that when the guy was not drunk, the victim did not want to take the action because he was the most perfect guy in the whole world. All right, and that's why the victims, essentially, because the victims, this is how they want the victim to be. They accept the apologies, they accept, you know, they accept that the perpetrator is genuinely sorry, and this is the phase, you know, this is the time when they're quite happy, and in this phase they forget about everything and they do not want to report it to the police. So this is a critical thing for us to understand. I will end this part of my presentation simply because I will continue in the second presentation, which I will do tomorrow, and talk about you know, victim and perpetrator psyche, victim psyche, what victims can do to reach out for help, exit strategies, exit plan, numbers to call, and that kind of thing, which I will continue tomorrow. So this ends my presentation for today, and I will take the opportunity to hand over to the second presenter, Superintendent Elaine.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here this afternoon. On behalf of Good afternoon. On behalf of the Commissioner of Police and its executive, we are very happy to partake in this webinar. The Gender-Based Violence Unit within the TTPS was launched in January by the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Gary Griffith. The Gender-Based Violence Officers, we are based throughout the 9 policing divisions throughout Trinidad and Tobago. What makes unit different is that we treat intra-family violence and domestic violence as crimes. Domestic violence, you know, previously And I think some people still view it in Trinidad and Tobago much like the Caribbean, where it's family social issue. The police did not want to get involved in family and couple business. This is no longer the case. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will make arrests and charge perpetrators. The Gender-Based Violence Unit is one of the units within the TPS where civilians and police officers work together. Because while we understand the need for offenders to be charged, we also understand the need for preventive work within the community. This is time for prevention. The Gender-Based Violence Unit, we employ a case management model in dealing with domestic violence within the community. We ensure that follow-up is done with the victim as well as the perpetrator on an ongoing basis. Officers will stress to perpetrators the objective of the protection orders. Protection orders, these are issued by the judiciary, by courts. We also explain the consequences if these orders are breached. We also hope to work with perpetrators and assist them in understanding their role in the relationship and how they can work towards healthy conflict resolution. Policies for officers to make arrangements to transport the victims to a place of safety or shelter with the location remaining unknown to the perpetrators. Most of these shelters, well, at least all shelters, remain a secret. Persons, the general public, are not normally aware as to the location, and that is for obvious reasons. The criminalization of domestic violence. We have effected approximately 120 arrests since the launch of the year. As a matter of fact, today, when the slide was completed, I would have to add about 10 more arrests on this 120. So we have like about 130 arrests, and when we look at the charges, we have like about 150 something charges. When we say charges, we include offenses like assault occasioning actual bodily harm. We have offenses under the 1108, which is the Offenses Against the Persons Act. We have offenses, for example, common assault. We have assault by beating. We have a range of criminal offenses. It is our hope that through criminal punishment and some outreach programs that we have planned and social intervention and the protection orders that are issued at the courts, right, that these things would act as a deterrent to perpetrators. We would really like to eradicate the stain on our social landscape and protect the lives of the nation's women and men. And men are included, because I don't want people to feel that, for example, domestic violence is only perpetrated towards women. We have men that are victims too. As a matter of fact, since the launching of the unit in January, we had over 50 men making reports, okay? And we investigate those reports with the strictest of confidentiality. Now, I spoke to you before about some of the offenses, right? And I told you about the assault by beating, that is under the Summary Offences Act. We have the assault occasioning actual bodily harm that I spoke about. We have the breach of the protection order, which is the only offense that is created under the Domestic Violence Act. We also have malicious wounding, which is under the 1108, the offenses against the person. We have choking, yeah? Those are just some of the offenses. Now, we have this mantra in society now where if you see something, say something. We want survivors, friends, relatives to feel confident when making reports and working with the Gender-Based Violence Unit. We have engaged in a lot of projects and new initiatives to help build this requested confidence. The following occurs when a report is made to the TTPS. We have a coordination of police, civilian staff, advocates, service providers to address individual cases. Because most times a survivor is not aware of some of the services that are available to them. So they need the added support of personnel agencies to assist. We have also developed multidisciplinary response teams that coordinate efforts from multi-governmental agencies. We have task force to explore solutions to systematic issues with police response. And finally, what I like to do is to share with you some of the locations of domestic violence officers. In the Port of Spain area, that will capture the Bessel Street, Laventil, Beetham. We have the Port of Spain unit based at the Bessel Street Police Station. At that said station, we also have the Northeastern Policing District. That covers the Barataria, San Juan, Santa Cruz, those areas, that caption area. They are all at Bessel Street, the officers. And the numbers there are 623-1395 and 625-8802. We have in the Northern Division Policing District, they are based at Maloney. This covers as far up as Kumuto, right down to the St. Joseph, Maracas, St. Joseph, Aruca, Tunapuna area. Then we have a unit at the Eastern Division. They are based in Sandy Grande. They cover the Valencia all the way up to Toco, Sandy Grande, Sally Bay. That's the jurisdiction. We have the Western Division. They are based in Maraval Police Station, and you can call them at any time. Yeah, we have the Southern Division area. They are based in the Monrepo Police Station, as well as the Southwestern Division. They are based at Labrie. Also, Central Division area, which is based at the Chaguanas Police Station. And then we have our sister island, Tobago. They are not forgotten. They are based in the Scarborough Police Station. So you have access to any of these police stations where you can interface with a gender-based violence officer. We also have important information to share with you with respect to making a report of a domestic violence nature, where you can dial 999, and you could also use the TTPS app. That's an avenue where you can be anonymous. Also, we have the recently launched online reporting on the TTPS website. This was launched, this is our most recent initiative, which I really endorse and welcome, by the Commissioner of Police. This was launched recently. I'm pleading with you all, use it. If you see something, say something. During the COVID period, where there were no walk-ins to the courts had domestic violence hotline that you could have accessed. It was 866-DVCT, right? And there's a place for maintenance, a number you can call, 866-CPAY. And they also had a COVID-19 public response hotline, 224-5182. You know, so a lot of things are happening in the nation to assist domestic violence, and we just have to reach out to them. Now, when we look at the statistics at the gender-based violence unit, during the COVID period, we saw an increase in domestic violence report in comparison to the same period last year. But the thing about it, although globally we have seen an increase in domestic violence report due to the COVID, in Trinidad and Tobago, we cannot adduce the facts and say that it's because of COVID there was an increase. What we can look at also for the increase is the approach since the gender-based violence unit was launched. The gender-based violence unit, it's recent, it was launched in January. The approach is different, we advertise, so, you know, persons are feeling more comfortable to come forward. So that could be one of the reasons why we had the increase. And that is the end of my presentation today. And we will continue tomorrow on domestic violence at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent. I do have some questions that was sent to me, and I do have 5 questions that were posed, and I will try my best to respond. I know we were scheduled from 6 to 7, so I would like the producer to kindly give me some guidance on whether we can continue or what kind of leeway we have with regard to continuing, so that I can respond to the questions. And of course, Superintendent may also have some questions coming to her. So until I get that guidance from the producer, I will proceed to answer or respond to some of the questions that were posed to me. And the first question sent to me was, strategies such as social distances, which are employed during COVID-19, may overlap with abusive relations. During the COVID period, what recommendations would you provide to someone in an intimate partner relationship? That's a very good question, and we did have an increase of cases coming to us. So what we would have done at the Coalition Against Domestic Violence is we established mechanisms through which persons could have reached out to us via Facebook, calling into our numbers and so on. And what we did was we provided online counseling, telecounseling, and that kind of response, simply because we knew that persons would have been stuck at home with perpetrators. In the absence of not being able to go to the home, that's one, and for the persons to come to our offices to do face-to-face therapy and counseling, we tried to be there as best as we could and have them reach out to us via telephone, via our Facebook page, and even through reaching out to some other person who could have reached out to us on the victim's behalf. So I know it would have been a difficult situation under COVID, and there would have been limited options for reaching out, but certainly reaching out via Facebook. We do have a Facebook page. We do have the hotlines 800-SAVE and all of the other hotlines in which we will give, and which would have been put up. We would ask those persons to continue to reach out and not suffer in silence and not go through it alone. Unfortunately, that's the best that we could have offered at that time, and which we still continue to offer at this time. The second question is, do you believe that social networks, both formal and informal, can decrease isolation and provide for the victim? If yes, in the case where the networks are not present, what can be done? So I believe that the social networks and the networks are very helpful. I can tell you that we have a WhatsApp group, and it's a very confidential WhatsApp group in which survivors and victims, they share on that WhatsApp group, and the WhatsApp group, it comprises persons who have experienced and who are now in a position to be mentors. So they can take victims through that process, and they can help to tell you what to do from beginning to end. So that's very, very important. In the instances where the networks are not present, the only thing you can do is try to reach out to somebody. I can tell you that persons may feel that the networks are not available, and I've just outlined one that's available. All victims can do is reach out to our number, which is 6240402. I can help, and our office can help that person. We now have a service coordinator, what we are referring to as psychosocial support services coordinator, who will take all those instances and all those situations of persons reaching out to help and who have no other kinds of support services, and we will deal with those cases one by one and individually to ensure that that person who does not have social networks can have the assistance and can have the support, because support can come in different ways. It can come from an individual, it can come from a social network, it can come from it can even come from a stranger, so that's very important. The third question is, unequal relationships was highlighted in your presentation. In the case where a man is experiencing intimate partner violence, how how can this be alleviated, and are there shelters for men? What I can say to you as the superintendent informed in her presentation, there is no distinction between male and female or men and women if you're a victim of violence. The same applies and the same laws will be applied. I know there will be a phobia associated with men reporting, but I would urge you to do the same thing. Do not suffer alone. Reach out for the help, and unequal relationship is based on who the perpetrator is. And if the perpetrator in this case is a woman, it's an unequal relationship of power. And in this case, it's the woman who is assuming the power and control in the relationship. All right. With respect to if there are shelters available for men, at the moment, the existing shelters, there are no spaces existing for men, but I do know that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through the Gender Ministry, they are opening up some shelters, 2 shelters they're opening up, and there are provisions, to the best of my understanding, for safe spaces for men with the government shelters. The 4th question is, social and economic insecurity may present crucial barriers for vulnerable individuals when seeking help. What can be done in this context? Okay, so let me try to understand that. Social and economic security may present crucial barriers for individual. Yes. What can be done in this context? And the person is right. The person asking is making a good point. There are limited social services available, and of course, in the instances where economic insecurity exists, it's very, very difficult for the person, the victim, to reach out for help. I want to say to you that in that situation, in that context, the victim cannot do it alone. It's important, and I cannot, and you may find me repeating this, but I have to repeat it simply because the only way to get out of the relationship of violence is not to do it alone and to reach out for the help. So there are agencies, for example, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, that can make interventions to see if we can partner you with other agencies that can help you with the insecurity. We are also encouraging, and we've been lobbying the government and the government programs to provide social services in the form of grants and so on. We continue to lobby for that. I know that right now there may be persons who may not have a lot of confidence in reaching out to government programs and government facilities for assistance because of the COVID situation and the backup with regard to giving out grants and so on. But it's the only way that I can see. There are other NGOs that assist victims, but what can happen is that if we are aware of the cases, we can do the necessary referrals for those persons. So reach out to us at 624-0402, and we can help to manage that and help the victims to manage that. That's very important. The 5th question, many females are more prone to achieving higher education than males. Is the lack of education really a contributing factor to intimate partner violence? Yes, it is, but only in the sense that if the victim does not have education, and I wish to clarify, there is formal education and academic education, and that is quite different from having a consciousness and developing a state of consciousness. So a person can have academic qualification and could be academically certified, and they may not have a sense of consciousness about what is happening, what are the options available, and so on. Once a person is certified, then a person is in a better position to have access to employment and jobs. That is not to say that the person who have jobs will not be victims of domestic violence, because there are persons and victims who are in well-paying jobs, who are CEOs, who are managers, who have well-paying jobs, and that has nothing to do with their academic qualifications. So on the one hand, it could be a barrier, but on the other hand, it may not necessarily be a barrier. Yes? And the sixth question is, do you have programs and or social psychological assistance for persons considered as perpetrators? At the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, we do provide support and therapy, clinical therapy for perpetrators as well as victims. And we are working right now to put together a program for perpetrators. We do know that the family court, for example, had a program for mandatory counseling program for perpetrators, but that was disbanded. We have been lobbying the family court so that they could reintroduce this program. So those are my responses to the 6 questions that were posed. Please feel free to reach out to me. I am leaving my cell phone number, which is 324-8606, or you can send your questions via our Facebook page, Trinidad and Tobago Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I'd be more than happy to provide further clarification and to put more meat into the questions, and I'd be more than happy to be available for that. So I'm not sure whether Superintendent had any questions, yes. So I'll hand over to her now for her to respond. So I'm going to unmute my microphone and remind Inspector to make sure that her microphone is on before responding. Yes.
On.
Yes.
Right. My first question here, can you state some of the community programs the unit has done for males and females? Well, thus far, in the month of February and March, just before COVID, we partnership with the Office of the Prime Minister, where we conducted outreach programs in different communities. We did sensitization about the unit, letting the public know about the unit and its function. We also did, with the Eastern Credit Union, private entities, we did some outreach programs with them. That was also sensitization work. And we also liaised with certain NGOs, the Womantra, we did something with them. So that is something that is ongoing. And we really wanted to drive a lot of outreach programs, but due to COVID, we were unable to do that person-to-person interaction. My second question, how secure is the reporting process for the victim? Very secured. The different platforms that I spoke about, the TTPS app 999, the online reporting, those things are very, very secured. And the numbers that I shared and the stations that I spoke to you about earlier, you can feel secure reporting the domestic violence reports. And the thing about it is that the Commissioner formed the Gender-Based Violence Unit to bring that added confidence to the general public, so that you'll feel confident to come forward and make your reports. And you can be rest assured that it will be dealt with the strictest of confidentiality. Number 3 question, what was the ratio of men to women who would report intimate partner violence over the last year? Over the last year, I don't have that statistics with me now, but I can probably check that statistics for you for 2019 to see how many males would have reported. But what I can tell you, since the unit was formed in January to present, we have over 50 men who have reported intimate partner violence to the unit, and that has been investigated as any investigation. Now, what I want to let the public know is that, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, it doesn't matter your sex, your creed, your sexual orientation, whether you're male, female, LGBTQI, you can be confident and feel comfortable to make your reports, right? Any victim of violence is one victim too much. We want to eradicate violence in this country, and we are encouraging persons to come and make the report, seek some kind of intervention before it reaches that avenue of fatality. Number 4 question, how safe are the safe houses in our society? Now, these safe houses, they are not run by police officers. They are run by NGOs and also by the government, the Office of the Prime Minister. I have not heard of any incident. I have no statistics to show that these homes are not safe, right? I have no statistics to say that. So I can say that they are fairly safe at this time, right? And these places are not known to everyone. So that increased the safety net in the entire process. These places, you can feel confident that it's okay. The thing about it is that you as the victim, when you are going there, you have to ensure that it continues to be safe, because you don't want, when victims go there, they keep communicating with the perpetrator, sending the perpetrator their location. You would be compromising the safe places when you do that, you know? So, and my 5th question, can you think of any models that can be used to limit stigma attached to men reporting cases of domestic violence? I'm not too sure what the question is saying, but what I can tell you, a lot of factors will come into place that will prevent men from reporting domestic violence. You know, men are seen as the stronger sex. You know, some men feel embarrassed, you know, to come and make reports that they have been beaten at home or being ill-treated at home, you know, but they need to come forward and make these reports before they retaliate and do something that could end them up, you know, on the sticky end of the law. We are pleading with men to come forward once you are victims of domestic violence, because at the end of the day, if you know, you keep taking the violence at home and then you retaliate and it's fatal, the history in the relationship would not be known to anybody but yourself, who would be around to say, well, okay, this was going on and he did this in self-defense. You understand? Come forward and make the reports and seek the necessary help and the assistance. And that was my last question.
I just wanted to add to that, to Superintendent, and say that the whole question of domestic violence is about making persons feel safe and secure if they are to report, regardless of if they are men and they are women. Sometimes we present and we present, which may seem to be presenting a perspective from a woman's perspective, simply because the majority of cases have been women, and traditionally, you know, so for example, for this year, 10 women have been killed already. And an average of 24 women are killed every year due to domestic violence. And actually in 2017, 42 women were killed out of 53 women murdered in 2017. 42 of those were said to be as a result of domestic violence cases. So the stats show that women are killed more and more, and the violence and the degree of violence is exerted on women more and more. That is not to say that we must discount the violence against men, but of course the violence against women, it's disturbing, it's endemic, and we see it as normal. That is why we place so much emphasis on violence against women, because it is seen as normal. And to put that into context, if we hear that a woman is beaten, that's, you know, we say, well, you know, that has been happening forever. But we express surprise when it's a man, because that is not within the norm. So that is, you know, that's just a way of showing how violence against women, it's normalized, and we act surprised when it's a man, because this, in our minds, this simply is not just supposed to happen to men. It's supposed to be the other way around, you know. So, but we encourage men who are victims, and we encourage all and sundry. We need to provide safe spaces and safe environments. And when I talk about safe spaces and safe environment, even for persons to disclose, we have a way of laughing at people and making fun of people, and blaming them and shaming them. That's an aspect of this violence that really bothers me and really must stop. So when a woman experiences violence, or or victim, so she looked for it. What did she do? It's because she looked for that because you don't see how she looks and how she dresses when the man come home from work, curlers in the hair with a duster. She didn't cook, so we find all kinds of reasons to blame. And when violence happens, or when a woman is murdered, or a victim is murdered, the first thing we ask, what that person do? I want to say up front, nothing justifies violence. Nothing justifies violence. And we are pushing and we are saying that we need to be in a place where we do not say things and agree with things like, if a man don't beat me, he don't love me. We hear that when we go to do community outreach, and people actually believe that, and they teach that to their children, and they teach that to persons in their community. No kind of violence is acceptable, and no kind of violence must be tolerated. And especially, we want to encourage communities. It's not about pulling the curtain and watching and not wanting to get involved. You have to be the voice for the victims. You have to seek justice for the victims. You have to be the voice as well for the perpetrators. We as community persons and persons in the communities, they know what's happening in the homes. They see it, and we know that there is a genuine fear of not wanting to become involved. We know that there is a genuine fear of being attacked, of being persecuted. But think about what that victim is going through. It doesn't make sense we hold our heads after that person has been murdered, or after the child has been murdered, and say to ourselves, I should have done something, we could have done something. We would just encourage persons out there to just get involved. And with the police now, and with all the apps, and with the phone calls and so on, it is so much easier, to reach out to the police. And I can tell you that with the establishment of with the gender-based violence unit, I can tell you from our perspective at the CADV, whenever we reach out to them, they respond. They respond quickly. We have a direct contact with them, and they respond in good time, and they offer the kind of support that is needed. Sorry to have to take so long, but I thought that we needed to say this, and just to send the message out there that we all have to work towards changing this, because it is a crisis. 1 in every 3 women have reported, and that was a survey done, and 1 in every 3 women do not report and do not tell anybody about the violence they are experiencing, inclusive of their family. They suffer in silence, just like the men who experience. They suffer in silence, and we want to put an end to that. Nobody should have to suffer in silence when they experience any sort of violence. So, producer, shall we wrap up there? If I do not get a cue from the producer, I think I will take it for granted that we are done, and encourage you once again to join us tomorrow during the same time, 6 and 7, when we will be available to do presentations, and of course to make ourselves available for any clarifications, any questions that you may have. And of course, if you do not want to ask it through this forum, please feel free to reach out to us, in our case at the CADV, via our Facebook, via WhatsApp messages and so on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending the time with us, and continue to work with us and to share the message that we need to adopt zero tolerance against domestic violence. It's against the ones we love, and we cannot say we love if we're using violence against them. That's entirely a no-no. So with that, thanks again.